This week, we have the privilege to be able to talk about the Song of Solomon, which is sometimes called the Song of Songs. And the theme is a Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs, is love and marriage. So it talks about the relationship between a man and a wife, a husband and a wife. And I could spend a lot of time here talking about, whether this is a literal conversation that's being had, whether it's, it is about a man and a woman, or it's about Jesus' love for the church. Everything that I can read scholarly points to the fact that the Jewish people, at least, accepted this as this was a man and a woman relationship. This was a husband and wife relationship. And it can be somewhat awkward. I've actually preached a couple of sermons specifically on sex from the Song of Solomon. And there are lots of awkward, passages and verses, and some of them I just read, and some of them we'll cover. Again, today's sermon isn't really about sex. It's about how love affects us, and the title of the sermon is "Love is Not Something That You Fall Into." So, if you were to study the Song of Solomon and when it was one of the new understandings that I have had recently about the Song of Solomon is I thought it covered this long span of time, but many people believe that it is speaking specifically about the week of the marriage. So for us, there's this big build up to the wedding, and then you have this ceremony, and then they might be a honeymoon, but that's kind of the end of it. It's just this one day kind of thing. But in Jewish custom, and specifically in the Old Testament, these would be long celebrations that would last days or a week. And so the wedding celebration was a week-long celebration. And so this seems to be a conversation that is happening during the marriage week. And so there are four main characters that kind of speak in this passage, but the one that does the most of the speaking is the woman, the maid of Shunem, or the woman from Shunem, or the Shunammite woman, ever how you want to say it. So she is the one that does most of the speaking. And there's, a conversation that we could have of whether actually Solomon wrote it, or whether it's her writing it from his perspective, or it's her writing it. The book is attributed to Solomon typically. But the Jewish people considered this book to be the most holy place. So if you were immature, or if you were young, you were not allowed to read it because it had such sensitive material, and you needed to be committed to someone to fully understand the meaning of the Song of Solomon. And so the awkwardness of it is present. So we see all throughout God's gift of love and God's gift of sexuality throughout the Song of Solomon, but the awkwardness of it can be real. Just reading the verses can be somewhat awkward between one another, but it is critical. And what I want to talk to us today is about strengthening our marriages. No one gets married believing that their marriage is going to fail. Recently, I was reading a book, and it gave this example of how we evaluate things differently depending on our place at that time. And so it said, the writer was saying, if I randomly walked into your wedding reception, so you had just gotten married, it's at this hotel, and you randomly walked. I randomly walked in, and in the receiving line, I came by and asked you a question: what are the chances that you're going to get divorced? You would say 0. You would say, we're different. That doesn't happen to us. It would never happen to us. It can't happen to us because we're special. But he said, if I went into your wedding reception and you were in a large hotel and down the hall was another wedding reception, and the question I asked you was, what are the chances that the people that just got married down the hall have of surviving? You would say 50 to 60%, because the divorce rate is around 50%. And you would be able to speak realistically about their situation, whereas you are fooled into believing you don't have to think about that yourself. And so no one begins marriage not believing for the best. I've never had anybody come into my office for premarital counseling and say, hey, we think we've got 3 to 5 good years and then it's probably going to be over, so we just kind of want to know how to make the best of the 3 to 5 that we've got. No, we are more objective about other people than we are ourselves. And what I want to talk about today is we need to understand, we need to pay attention to our own marriage, our own relationships, our own family, and we need to work on that. So there are 3 things I'm going to talk about today. That's not uncommon. That would be kind of how it would look on a normal Sunday. And all of the characters from the book that are mentioned previously in the book show up in this one final chapter, chapter 8 of the Song of Solomon. So you get the Shunammite woman and you get the Solomon, or you get the husband and the wife, together. You get the women of Jerusalem speaking, and you get the woman's brothers who are included in this chapter. And so let's talk about these specific things that I want to look at. Number 1, love considers timing. I hear people say from time to time, well, I just say whatever's on my mind. And my advice is to stop that practice. Like, just stop it. And I've been guilty of it myself, but stop it. Stop the practice of just saying whatever's on your mind. Because just because it's on your mind, and even just because it's true, doesn't mean you need to say it. You need to think about the timing of what you are going to say. You see, I would say, when you say it, may be as important or more important than what you say. So the timing of what you do may be more important than what you actually do if you do it at the wrong time. So if the timing is wrong, the effectiveness, even if it's the right thing, is going to be limited. And so this verse, the first 4 verses say this. It says, oh, I wish you were my brother who nursed at my mother's breast. Then I could kiss you no matter who was watching and no one would criticize me. I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I read things and I go, that is weird. And that kind of feels weird to me. I think of, incestual relationships. Like, this just sounds weird, okay? But this is the woman speaking, and it says, I would bring you to my childhood home, and there you would teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, my sweet pomegranate wine. Your left arm would be under my head, and your right arm would embrace me. So let me give you a little bit of context here, and then I'll look at the last verse. A little bit of context is husband and wife public affection was frowned upon in this culture. But family affection, so brother, sister, father, mother, to a child would not have been. The greeting would have been much more passionate. They often would kiss each other on the cheek or on the mouth, and it wasn't considered weird. And so the affection shown between family members, siblings, or parents would have been probably more affectionate, at least in the public viewpoint, than we would have seen the husband and wife. And so what she's saying is, like, I wish I had the ability that I could have, show my affection for you wherever I wanted to, whenever I wanted to, without it being frowned upon. But she begins, and she ends here by saying, promise me, O women of Jerusalem, not to awaken love until the time is right. There are so many pieces to this, but timing is critical in intimacy. I grew up in an age where there were purity challenges and purity covenants that people made. And we could have a conversation about whether that's effective or right or wise or even realistic. What I would say that is this: if physical intimacy happens too early in someone's life, it can have a significant impact on not just that relationship, but the relationships to come. And physical intimacy, or I believe that's what she's talking about here, that there's a time and a place for that to happen in your life, and you don't want to do it too soon with the wrong person. You know, even when you get to the New Testament, the Apostle Paul warns us about sexual relationships, even with a prostitute. He says it's a sin against the body. There's this coming together that has an effect on you that is greater than most any other sin. And so the impact on your life is significant. And so timing is important. When you give yourself intimately to someone, matters, and you need to guard that, be prepared for that. But physical affection has a significant impact on relationships in general. Timing in general, when it comes to intimacy, is critical. Timing in general in your relationships is critical. You know, being aware of the situation. So this week you'll hear some podcasts, and it's just me and my wife who are talking about the Song of Solomon. And one of the things we'll talk about is timing, that our schedules don't always match, you know. So I wake up wide awake and then I go to sleep. You know, and it's pretty much the same speed all day. There's not but she in the morning takes her about an hour kind of to get to normal functioning state. Like, she just doesn't jump right up. But when it's time for bed, it takes her a while to wind down the same way. And so, you know, we both have to understand that when it comes to physical intimacy, when it comes to a conversation, you know, and you need to think through, you know, is the morning the best time for us to talk about this, for us to approach this, for us to, you know, to make sure that we're being intimate with one another. And it's not just about intimacy. It can be about finances or children, parenting, you know, retirement, travel, anything you need to talk about. You know, when you do it matters. Understanding the time of it matters. You know, should you do it when they're hungry? Do you know what that looks like? You know, are there certain events that you should talk after or you shouldn't talk after? You know, timing can be everything. And my experience is this: timing can be the difference between a productive conversation and a fight. If you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and it might be something you need to talk about, but it turns into a fight. Whereas other times, if you say it at the right time, what could have been a significant conflict becomes a productive conversation. And so timing is important when it comes to love. Love considers timing. The second thing is love requires commitment. Love's not for the faint of heart. Like you don't, it's not just something that happens. You know, people talk about, I fell in love with them or I've fallen out of love with them. I can't think of anything that people fall into that they're excited about other than love. If you fall into a pool, you fall into a mud puddle, or you fall in the road, you know, or you fall down the steps, nobody goes, oh, this was great. No, that's not what happens. The same is true of love. It's not something you fall into. You have to be intentional about it. And it requires some commitment that goes along with that. And anything you're committed to, it creates certain challenges in your life. And marriage was never intended to be temporary. And so anything that's not meant to be temporary requires our commitment to follow through on it. And there are some days you are going to feel like being married, and there are going to be some days you don't feel like being married or being in this relationship or honoring your commitment. You may not feel like it, but the commitment, the requirement of commitment causes you to stay there. And it says, beginning in verse 5, it says, who is sweeping in from the desert, leaning over her lover? I aroused you under the apple tree where your mother gave you birth, where in great pain she delivered you. So, you know, she's talking about, you know, we're being intimate in the same place your mom you gave birth to you. And it says, place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, is jealousy as enduring as the grave. Love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor rivers drown it. If a man tried to buy love with all his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. She says first, or the writer here says first, the conversation is, place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. You know, this sealing of, the seals they would be talking about would be a seal on a letter or a mark on an arm, that almost like a brand that says, I belong to you. It's almost, it's very slave-like, just to be honest with you. What she's speaking of here, like a seal on your arm, this thing that you belong to me. And I don't think that is not true in Scripture. Like it says in the New Testament, the writers would tell us that my body belongs to my wife and her body belongs to me. It becomes a mutual ownership, a mutual submission to one another. And so she's saying, like, this is this commitment that is lifelong, that no matter where you are and where you go, people will know. It says, for love is as strong as death, is jealousy as is enduring as the grave. This whole concept of till death do us part, like this is something we say in marriage ceremonies, like we are committed to until we die. Like it needs to be as strong as death. When you get in a marital relationship, when you get in that type of relationship, you want to be committed to you die. It says love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame. And we'll talk about this in just a minute. Fire requires attention. You know, when you first get married, you know, you got a burning hot fire, you know, almost a forest fire that's out of control, where everything's raging, you know, but over time, it dies down. And you have to pay attention to it. Real love cannot be quenched. He says, many waters cannot quench love, nor rivers drown it. It's this powerful force that nothing can put it out. And then the last piece here about commitment, it says, if a man tried to buy love with all of his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. Your money, you cannot buy love. Money's nice when you love somebody, but you can't buy love. And I would say money is not the answer for love, nor should it be the disruptor of love. And way too often it is. We think we can buy our way into their heart, or we think, you know, it becomes the disruptor because we can't agree on it. You will never have a successful marriage. Frankly, I don't think you'll ever have a successful relationship unless you are committed. Love requires commitment. And the last thing is this: love must be attended to. Strong marriages don't happen by accident. You know, I said earlier, fires require some attention. You know, you have to stoke them occasionally. You have to add more wood to the fire. You have to put fuel in the fire, whatever is going to take place. The same is true of your finances. They require constant attention and constant evaluation. There's no ability to say, I've done everything I need to do and I don't need to think about it anymore. Your health requires checkups and attention. You know, I'm getting to the age now that every so often there are tests that the doctors expect me to take, you know, certain exams, because they need attention. You have to pay attention to it, because if you don't, like the reason why they do these exams is because if you catch it early enough, if you see the symptoms early enough for things like cancer, the pain is minimal. The cost, the disruption is minimal. But if you don't pay attention to it, if it's not called early enough, then the pain of recovery, the pain to fix it, is difficult, and sometimes it cannot be fixed because it has gone so far. The same is true in our marriage. When we don't pay attention, when we're not paying constant attention to how we communicate, what we do, how we treat one another, where is our marriage going, where are we struggling at, what are the weak points for us right now, and we're not working on those things, the pain of fixing them can be enormous. And there is no button in marriage where you get to push and it's cruise control from there on out. The last few verses of this there's a lot to say. Some of it I won't talk about, but it says, so this is her brother speaking, says, we have a little sister too young to have breasts. What will we do for our sister if someone asks to marry her? If she is a virgin like a wall, we will protect her with a silver tower. But if she is promiscuous like a swinging door, we will block her door with a cedar bar. And so I don't know whether she's saying my brothers thought this about me, or her brothers are actually saying this about her, or they had said this about her. But, they only saw her as this little girl, like, this innocent little girl, and our job is to protect her. But she says, I was a virgin like a wall. Now my breasts are like towers. When my lover looks at me, he is delighted with what he sees. And I just want to say here that it is okay to be attracted to your spouse and to be attracted to physical qualities of your spouse. And she knows that he is and recognizes that. And she says he is delighted by that. But she goes on and says, Solomon has a vineyard in Bel-Hamon, which he leases out to tenant farmers. Each of them pays 1,000 pieces of silver for harvesting its fruit. But my vineyard is mine to give, and Solomon need not pay 1,000 pieces of silver, but I will give 200 pieces to those who care for its vines. Oh, my darling, lingering in the gardens, your companions are fortunate to hear your voice. Let me hear it too. Come away, my love. Be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. There's a lot of erotic pieces to Song of Solomon, and that's not the point of this message. But the last part here that she talks about a vineyard. And there are people who care for these vineyards, and she says, I have a vineyard, and I want him, he doesn't have to pay to take care of my vineyard, but I want him to care or to attend to my own vineyard. Vineyards require care, otherwise they become overrun and things impede. Weeds take over, vines take over, plants die because there's not enough water, or they're not paying attention enough to them. And we have to be aware of what that is and what that looks like and how we attend to our relationships. They must be attended to. Marriage, and frankly, all relationships are much the same way. She wants to be attended to. She wants to be attended, and that looks different for every single person. The most significant people in your life want to be attended to. Not necessarily the way you may want to attend to them, but the way they want to be attended to. That's that whole concept of love languages. If you've never read Love Languages, I would encourage you to do that, because you have one and they have one, and learning to speak theirs, attend to their needs, is a critical piece to marriage. Your spouse needs to be attended to. Your spouse needs the attention, constantly paying attention to what are they saying, what is important to them, what do they need, how can I show them that I love them. You have to pay attention. I'm always amazed when we play games, and I travel a lot. I've been on a lot of cruise ships. They play this love and marriage game, and it's fun to watch couples who know a lot about one another because they've been paying attention. And then there'll be other couples who are clueless, like they know nothing about the other one. And if we don't pay attention to their moods, to their desires, what do they wish? And it's not just shoe size or clothes size. Maybe that's a question you should ask. But it's also, what do they enjoy? What is important to them? How do they feel most loved? What are the things that I do that speak to them the most. And my prayer for you, my prayer for your marriage, my prayer for your relationships is that they are strengthened, that you don't just go through life falling into something and falling out of something, that you do the things that are necessary to make them significant, that you understand timing, that you realize it takes commitment, that you pay attention to the situation so that your relationships thrive, that they grow, that they bring forth fruit, and that you are blessed by it and everyone around you is blessed by it. Gardens that are attended to flourish and benefit many people. The same is true of relationship. Relationships that are attended to bring forth fruit that bless many people. My challenge, my prayer for you is that your marriage is attended to and you are committed to one another and you practice the things that you need to practice so that you bring forth fruit and other people are blessed. Be intentional in your marriage. Let's pray today. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of love, for the gift of sex, for the gift of intimacy, for the gift of marriage, for the gift of family. God, I pray that we would be intentional about the most important relationships that you have placed in our life, our spouse, our children. Help us to be aware of the things that we need to be doing, to pay attention, to be committed, to practice timing so that our marriages grow and bring forth fruit that blesses the people around us. I pray, God, that you would strengthen our homes, strengthen our marriages, strengthen our families, strengthen our relationships so that they prosper and bring glory to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.